Greetings, Guardians, my name is Byfear. Sorry that it took us so long to get here, but today we're covering the lore of the new dungeon released with this season of The Haunted, Duality. But what is Duality? In short, it's a mind heist. Our foe, Calus, has for a long time been an enigma full of many secrets. The new dungeon allows us to travel deep into the Emperor's mind and to get a look at his deepest shames, his greatest regrets, and his darkest ambitions. It also tells us a whole lot about the story of Calus, which for some of you old hands of the lore community is definitely retreading old ground, but for a new set of players, I think it's a great introduction to the Emperor's story, and it does go into many of the events that happened in much greater detail. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. Before we start the story, I just want to remind you all that the charity live stream for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is going live on June 6th at midday Eastern Standard Time. We're raising money with the team over at GCX, and we're a part of their big charity marathon. We'll be live for 4 hours raising money for the Children's Hospital. Bungie has also announced that you'll be able to get some exclusive Destiny emblems for donating $20 or $60. So if you're looking for a bit of Destiny swag and want to see us doing a whole bunch of nonsense on stream, come along and support the kids at St. Jude. We'll be going live on twitch.tv/GCX event. Also, take a look out on my Twitter for our incentives and donations list, coming a little bit later after this video has been released. Some point maybe in the next few days. Anyway, back to the lore. The story of Duality begins in an unusual enough place, with Hawthorne. She's been a major player in the tower's infrastructure as far as clan organizations are concerned, but you could hardly be mistaken for not hearing about her if you're a new player. Now though, she is sent for us and has used channels outside the Vanguard's standard frame of communication. When we arrive, she tells us that Eris needs to speak with us in the Leviathan, and that she can't communicate using those standard Vanguard channels. Whatever she's doing, she's trying to keep it from Ikora Rey. Whatever this thing is about, it's bound to be serious. So we make our way to Eris, and that's where all of this truly begins.
You arrive. Good. Yes. We have only a brief window of opportunity. The darkness is thick here, coalesced inside this effigy of Emperor Calus. It is tethered to his very mind. I have snared that thread, caught it between my fingers and woven it into a tapestry. One that I can weave you into. Enter Calus's consciousness. Use this opportunity to steal his darkest secrets from him. Now go. Time is of the essence. What you feel may seem like reality, but it is not the one you know. Your mind now stretches across a vast gulf.
What we're about to enter into is a realm of thought that is very much tangible thanks to Eris's manipulations. The realm is one that conveys Calus's consciousness, and as a result, there are elements to his story that are appropriately reflected. Unlike the nightmare dimensions that the Scions under Calus's command might conjure, this realm is one where all powers are lent a fair degree of authority, but the nightmares we face here are not ours, but Calus's. His greatest regrets and most powerful fears are made manifest within these dreams, and so we'll be able to see a great many foes from his past, as well as many who represent his most personal failures. But it goes even deeper than that, as even small details of the dungeon are revealing. When passing through the dream normally, one can see the Cabal within Calus's mind as Loyalist Cabal dressed in the Imperial regalia of purple and gold, but when you cross over into one of the nightmare dimensions, clad in red and shadow, you can see that the Cabal themselves change too. When living in Calus's nightmare, you see that the Cabal soldiers are soldiers from the Red Legion, the same soldiers that betrayed him so many years ago. A nightmare that has plagued him ever since the most foundational event in his story, the Midnight Coup. In order to understand the story of the Duality Dungeon, you must understand the story of Calus, and so I'll be telling that story and interjecting the dialogue of the dungeon as we move forward. The dungeon, after all, tells the story of Callus's greatest regrets, and it's only fitting that we should understand it all as we go onward. Time won't be perfectly linear in the dungeon. There is a fair degree of jumping around. We skip all over the timeline of Callus's story, even though most of it is fairly linear. So, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to cover the events as they are raised in the dungeon. This won't give you the perfect chronological timeline, but it will give you a great play-by-play of the dungeon as it happens. When we first enter into the mindscape of the Emperor, we hear the following exchange from Eris, and in Callus's mind, we hear one of Callus's memories.
This is not what I anticipated. The imprint of Callus's consciousness is fractured, straining, as if Callus's mind is at war with itself. Callus? No, not Callus, but an echo of him. This is a recollection of a time since past.
My bell conquest is so grand, because I have lived a grand life. One day, my daughter, yours will be just as majestic.
You are experiencing echoes of Callus's personal torment. Glimpses into his past which may provide insight to the future. I must focus to maintain your connection to this mindscape. From here, you must navigate these memories on your own.
So here we can start to see the picture of what we will experience as we go forward. Moments of Callus's life are bound within the very fabric of this reality, and they will allow us to better understand the story of the Emperor and to better know his weaknesses. It is also here that we get an idea of the first of the notes on Callus's memories. The one that was the first revealed to us is clearly of Callus describing his Bell of Conquests to Keitel. For those that don't know, Bells of Conquest are an ancient Cabal tradition. Essentially, one rings an opponent's Bell of Conquest in order to invoke a right of proving, a sort of battle between the two foes. One can embellish one's Bell of Conquest upon completing certain tasks, mostly martial tasks. They are emblazoned for their accomplishments, and the largest bells of conquest in the old days of the Cabal warlords were even flown aboard starships and were large enough to dwarf even the largest Cabal colossi. Such bells were, needless to say, reserved for mighty warlords who would be able to call on massive armies and armadas should even one opponent ring their bell and challenge them. It's also here, within both the nightmare and normal versions of this first Grand Hall, that we get a glimpse at the repressed memories of Callus. It appears that these memories are stored within broken bells of conquest, each of which perhaps relates to specific moments in Callus's life or pertains to a particular individual. Each also contains a shard of darkness, similar to the knowledge shards from the Vow of the Disciple raid. It is perhaps unsurprising that these repressed memories are preserved by artifacts of darkness which resonate with psychic imprints and memories of past events. This is the common association with the powers of darkness, which are fairly represented by holding the ability to hold onto memories and release them when one interacts with them. It's kind of a bit like everything we did in Witch Queen. You remember how Deep Sight works, and remember how we were able to use it to access the Altar of Reflection and view Savathun's past? I'd wager that it's a similar principle. The first two of these suppressed memories are from near the beginning of the Emperor's rise to power. Take a listen to these two, found in the same location, just one in a nightmare realm and one in the normal realm.
The Praetorian's time has come to an end. Too long have the people of Torobatha languished under their heel. A world that knows only war has no future. We were not always conquerors. We were not always tyrants. If violence carved us into the shape of what we are now, then so shall violence be that shape's undoing. Ever since she was born, Kaito has shown a curiosity for the world beyond. She shares my fascinations. I worry for her, for the galaxy she will grow up in, for the future of our people. But perhaps the time for worries is at an end. My daughter will grow up knowing only celebration, triumph, and peace. This is the world I made.
The first suppressed memory is Callus talking about the government that he overthrew in order to become emperor. It represents the start of his journey and the beginning of his attempt to pull his people away from the ways of war and violence. He believed sincerely that violence would destroy the society that they had built on Torobatl. You can see more about the moments before and after this in the lore tabs of the old Leviathan raid weapons, Alone as a God and Mob Justice, the sniper rifle and the SMG. Because this video would be way too long if I added them in, I'm going to see about linking all of these old lore tabs down below in the description if you want to read them. They're very short, but they do give crucial details. This is the case for all of the old Leviathan raid weapons, so I'd highly recommend going back and looking at all of them, because you know what? It adds a lot of relevant detail. If you've ever been one of those people that loved the Midnight Coup hand cannon, yeah, this is a good excuse to read that one too. Following on from this moment, we can also see how the greater changes within the Empire would affect those that had previously ruled it. The former consul of the Praetoriate was castrated as Callus's inaugural address was commenced and was left to flee into the wastes of Torobatl. Inaugural address, by the way, is also another raid weapon from the original Leviathan raid, the pulse rifle. This was a mistake for Callus undoubtedly, who would live to see his enemy return, even as he reformed the Cabal Empire. The second of these suppressed memories is another moment at which we see Callus talking about Keitel, and how he believed that there was genuinely hope for her and his people going forward. If there was ever a moment in his lifetime where Callus could be considered genuinely good, perhaps it was in these moments. But these times were of relative peace, and as most things of peace in the Cabal Empire can be seen to do, it would not last. Even before there was truly a movement to depose the Emperor, he suspected that there were detractors who wished to see the Cabal return to the ways of old. The scars of Callus's bodyguard, Lictor Sheotet, speak enough truth to this notion. The Emperor needed a solution to this problem of potential rebellion, and he believed that in the arenas of Torobatl he would find his solution. A brilliant gladiator, strong and tactful, but bleached with albino skin and a scarred face that told of his brutal upbringing. His name was Ghaul. Callus saw the potential of this rising warrior and elevated him, honoring him with the glory of becoming the Primus of the Red Legion. Callus's third suppressed memory within this dungeon, Duality, speaks of his plans for Ghaul, and the situation in which Callus finds himself at the time. The memory is also from a moment where Callus is clearly intoxicated. Take a listen.
Peace, Earth is detracted. I was too kind in my coup against the Praetorians, drank too deep of the cup of mercy. Now, in long shadows in the night, clutching knives, eyes at my back, I hear them whispering. I hear them. But soon, those whispers will become screams. The Ghost Primus is the answer to this sedition. My Red Legion, anointed in blood.
Eventually, the reality of the situation would reveal itself. Ghaul was an orphan who had been left to die as the runt of a litter in the wastes of Torobatl. But then, as fate would have it, the exiled consul who Callus had castrated discovered the dying infant. Being unable to bear sons or daughters of his own, perhaps the consul was spurred to raise Gaul as his own. Perhaps it was always transparent that Gaul was a method of revenge, a vector for his ability to return to power. Whatever the case, it changed little about what happened next. Their plan was hatched, and would spring into motion as the years advanced, and as Gaul was given the rank of Primus. And thus the events of the Midnight Coup would unfold. All the conspirators would play their parts. The consul devised the plan and oversaw the operation that would depose the emperor. Lictor Sheotet would open the palace doors for the soldiers of the Red Legion, which were led by Dominus Gaul. Keitel would stop her father before he could reverse the fortunes of the conspirators. There were, of course, others. Informants, message couriers, those who soothed the crowds in the time of the transition of power, those who organized the military to ensure that the coup was successful, all played their part in one way or another. When they barged into the royal chambers, the conspirators secured Calus. The emperor and the future Dominus, Gaul, would exchange but a few words, and then Calus would be forced into exile. That conversation is recorded in the dungeon. Take a listen.
Exile is the mighty Gaul, too great a coward to kneel down and take my head from my shoulders. I am as you, and I will kill you of my choice. But it is not. It will stain my blade. Remember that.
From this moment in the dead of night, Calus's fate was sealed. Along with his loyalists from the Imperial Palace, the Emperor was marched all the way to the Leviathan, a grand ship. He would board it, and the ship would be set adrift without the ability to navigate and would be lost in the tides of space. It would be forced to chart a region of space that was unknown and would reach the edge of the universe. On this voyage, as his empire and all that he had worked for was crumbling back into the warlike people that he used to know, Calus was inconsolable. He fell into a deep melancholy, and not a single one of his servants' words would act as a soothing balm. Take a listen to this moment as it appears in the fourth suppressed memory.
My servants come, but I refuse their succor. I will not feast. I will not drink. I will wither away until there is nothing left. My love has been turned to poison in my veins. They do not appreciate all that I have done to them. My sacrifices. All betrayal is inevitable. We are a ring of beasts, feasting upon one another.
It's strange that I should mention it, but this moment is recorded in another lore book. I believe that this is one of the few credible entries of a lore book which is commonly suspect to lies. That lore book, for those of you who are well versed in the lore, you may know is the Chronicon, and it, for the most part, recounts an incredibly revisionist history of the world of Calus's time in exile. However, its early entries are narrated by a scribe, who was seemingly disposed of before the true revisionist historians took over, and he describes Calus's mood in a similar light. All of the revisionist historians would truly take over when Calus and the Leviathan encountered the Witness, and at that point, Calus would step out onto the hull of the Leviathan and would supposedly be witnessed. And at this moment he was convinced of his place in the universe as the herald of the Black Edge, the herald of the end of the universe. Following this, we drop down into the area of the first encounter, and this recounts a moment that's a little further forward in the future. There are words spoken here by Calus, and we hear these words at the birth of Galran, the Cabal champion that was originally engineered to bear the Crown of Sorrow. The words you're about to hear Callus say are pulled directly from the lore, and they were in fact some of the few lucid words that Galran ever heard. Remember that Galran had only ever been alive for a few moments before he was forced to wear the crown.
You were made to be a sorrow bearer. I seek a hive commander, but those are not so readily available. So I made you.
You can find the original transcript of this full conversation in a piece of Bungie.net web lore, which is titled, Am I to Cast a Shadow? It's something that I'll look about linking down below in the description as well. When you spawn, you can see the tanks surrounding the location, which contain similar Cabal clones. Remember that on board the Leviathan, as well as around the Royal Pools in particular, the operation of Callus's cloning really does take shape. That's the place at which you're able to see giant Cabal gladiators birthed freshly into combat to fight us in the Leviathan raid. In this encounter, we face down the nightmare of Galran, a nightmare and regret perhaps because it was a failure on Callus's part. He had failed to uncover the true powers of the Witch Queen and was unable to understand the ease with which she could overpower Galran's conditioning through the Crown of Sorrow. Galran represents a failure for Callus's perfect future to unravel as he planned, a plan that he had his scribes record in the Chronicon in advance. During this encounter, it is possible to obtain one of Callus's repressed memories that speaks about this time that he spent embracing and viewing the deep as well. Take a quick listen to this.
At the edge of the universe, I stared into the infinite deep. It stared back and was pleased. I become the herald of victory, bear witness for all creation. The key is to realize the future isn't an enemy to be fought. It is a friend to embrace, a closing of the circle. And when it comes, I reserve the right to be last.
At the time, this was very much what Callus believed, that he was to be one amongst the dying, one amongst the billions in a universe marked to close, and he aspired to join with death, and to witness its close as creation ceased to be. He had always kept his allegiance to dark forces, and now they would command him. But his understanding of the battle he now fights has evolved, as has he. After the battle with the Nightmare of Galran, and after its defeat, we continue to head deeper into the recesses of Callus's memory, down into the deeper reaches of his mind. We reach a crypt, and in this place some remarkable things are revealed. There's a repressed memory in here, but also it's worth talking in a little bit about Callus's contempt for the dead and for the old traditions of the Empire. Let's listen to the repressed memory first.
The light is a fascinating thing, and in my ignorant youth, I may have seen it as aspirational, like gold. I see this force for what it truly is. Eternal life after death is a trick of the light, an illusion. Nothing is forever. But these guardians entertain me. I will use their ignorance, shower them with lavish gifts, with praise. I will watch them dance into the grave of creation for my amusement.
So for any of those of you who were unswayed by the fact that Callus literally murdered his daughter's dog because he was jealous of how much love the dog was getting, Yeah, he was never on our side. We were always entertainment and pawns to him. This was always a manipulation for his own entertainment. He only bothered with us because we could be useful. His words regarding his own kin that you can see around in these crypts are equally unkind. Take a listen to these two recordings, the first from when we enter this large cavernous space, and the second from when we exit it.
There was a time I would have gladly laid in death beside you, here in these crypts. But we were both different then.
Guardian, down.
No one of honor will be interred here. The dead are raw materials and nothing more.
Guardian, down.
Here I suppose we see Callus's nihilism truly set into his character. He knows that the death of the universe is supposed to come about thanks to the Witness, and he knows that there won't be anything by the end of it. He is absolutely certain of this, and is willing to shirk the traditions of his empire now, and the universe itself, in favor of his belief in this absolute truth. But faith is not an unshakable thing. Callus himself has doubts, and as we venture further, we're able to hear more about them. In his seventh repressed memory that we hear, we are able to see that Callus's faith begins to wane, but ultimately it turns to new resolve. Take a listen to this, and see if you can guess before I tell you which moment this leads to.
Savathûn. Savathûn. She knew he had me. Had I not birthed Galra, had he not donned the crown, I would be lost. The voice warned me of her, but I did not heed it. And the voice is so silent now. The promised end is at hand, as worlds are swallowed into nothing, and I hear nothing. Excruciating silence. Perhaps I have displeased it. Or perhaps I am not listening hard enough.
We can actually peg the chronology of this particular memory between the Season of Arrivals and the Season of the Chosen, and more specifically, in the middle of the Season of the Hunt, aka Beyond Light, when we get Stasis. We know that, as moments after Galran has been killed, we could see these wheels of thought being turned into motion, and it also mentions how the Black Fleet in the Season of Arrivals has begun to abduct worlds. This means that this had to have occurred after the Season of Arrivals, and at the beginning of the Season of the Hunt. However, this is before the ultimate result of all of these conclusions has been formed, which is the events of the Glycon Volatus. This would have been something that Callus undertook because he was losing faith in the Witness. He was losing faith because the voice of the Witness was becoming more and more quiet. At the beginning of the lore surrounding the Glycon, we actually see Catabasis, his shadow and a guardian still loyal to him, interacting with Callus, and it's at this moment that we then get an idea of what Callus's aim here truly was. At first, he wasn't so reverential. He was actually looking to hold the darkness to account, and to allow a god to sit there and explain itself to the Emperor. It was one of these moments at which Callus truly was potentially biting off more than he could chew. But give him any statement you will about his nature, he was determined in this one course of action. It would represent a terrible bargain, and it would require a huge amount of death. It would mean that the crew of the Glycon Volatus would die to the many reanimated Scorn, and it would mean the repurposing of the Crown of Sorrow, as well as the death of all hands upon the ship that would be lost in the anomaly. This, of course, would in turn lead the Glycon Volatus to be set adrift in the anomaly around Mars, where we would eventually find it as a distress signal was sent out. And of course, this leads us to the Presage mission, where we would investigate the ship with the assistance of Keitel and Savathûn, who was posing as Osiris at the time. Next, we enter a large arena. It's strange to see this place again because I believe this is the arena within which Callus's shadows were cast. In other words, where Callus's shadows accepted their new rank as his elite enforcers. We can tell this because of the line that Callus states when we enter this place. Again, it's repeated from the Am I to Cast a Shadow lore entry on Bungie.net, where Callus says the exact words to Galran that we hear here. These exact words were said before placing the Crown of Sorrows on Galran's head. Take a listen to this line really quickly.
Shadows were cast here, history made.
Again, you can get more context on that thanks to the lore entry on Bungie.net, which should be linked down below in the description. In this same room, we can find an 8th repressed memory, and it's here that Callus gives us a little more context on another of his shadows and their discoveries. This is more information about Catabases, and apparently how he assisted Callus in finding a more suitable bearer for the Crown of Sorrows, namely the Scorn.
In my haste to find a suitable bearer for the Crown of Sorrow, I failed to see a more elegant solution. The Hive were not those who could most elegantly bear the crown. My shadow, Catabasis, found the alternative. Mindless corpses of fallen, risen through an Ahamkara's wish magic, fueled by darkness-infused ether, the Scorn. The only component that was missing was a connective tissue, and this, the Egregore spores would provide.
There's a lot more I need to say about Egregore in particular, but the important thing to understand for the moment is that when activated in a certain way, the spores can link to their mycelial network and can bridge the gap across dimensions and space. This combination of a dead thing that could be easily puppeted and the Egregore to link them would be the key to Callus's efforts to commune with the Witness. It would allow the Witness to suddenly manifest some of its consciousness within a body, and would then allow the Witness to view Callus and do with them what they wished. When we've completed this arena, we arrive at the vault. Not a real vault, you understand, but a vault guarding Callus's greatest shame. It's guarded by more nightmares that we need to face, and it's here that we need to go back in time a little bit, because this is not something that continues on from the story of the Glycan Volatus. It's actually something which relates back to his greatest shame, and that shame comes around about the time of the Midnight Coup. You see, there were many conspirators with the Midnight Coup, but the nightmares we face here represent the 3 greatest military forces outside of the obvious leaders. These 3 nightmares that individually guard the door of the vault are Kahok, sworn of Umunarath, Emunut, sworn of Moli Imoli, and Urua, sworn of Sheotet. Based on their names and who they're sworn to, these 3 appear to be some of the top lieutenants of the 3 major sub-commanders in the Midnight Coup, namely Lictor Sheotet, Callus's bodyguard, Umunarath, the primus of all legions and Evocate general, his lead general and the one who would command all of his military forces, and Moli Imoli, a great former Colossus turned master of ceremonies who calmed the crowds and allowed a smooth transition of power to be more easily undertaken. These 3 commanders guard the way deeper into the darkest recesses of Callus's mind. But even as we open the vault door to Callus's deepest shame, there is a sense that some great threshold has been passed. This door has been opened, and it can no longer be closed, whatever that might mean. Still, our mission seems clear, and we must press onwards. Before doing this, though, we can obtain the 9th repressed memory within the vault room, and it tells us about what Callus did after he disappeared from the Glycan, and what he's been doing with the Leviathan ever since. Take a listen.
Through the crowd of sorrow, the voice in the darkness called out to me, beckoning me to the absence of Mercury. At first, I feared the Leviathan would not survive the journey, as the Glycon had been rent asunder by a similar journey. But my Leviathan, it is strong. Its heart beats anew, and as it pierced the veil of creation, the voice greeted me. There were such sights to behold.
If we ever needed conclusive proof of it, we have it there. Callus is now fully in league with the Witness and serves as one of its disciples. This new information about the Leviathan disappearing where Mercury used to be implies that there might be similar pockets of dark space, such as the anomaly where we found the Glycon, all over the system. In the next repressed memory, we see more of what happened in the anomaly of Mercury.
The Witness's voice is so strong now. I hear it clearer than my own. I understand now what true paracausality is. The light and the dark are threads on a loom, woven into the tapestry of the universe by those who wield it. The Witness would see things differently. The gaps between those threads. Freedom from the greater design. Freedom for all.
We know the Witness isn't above lying. I highly doubt that if there was to be a complete end to all life in the universe, that Callus would be the last. In my opinion, the Witness is playing to Callus's desires and is reinforcing some confirmation bias in Callus's mind, affirming the loyalty of an ally that is likely to disrupt its enemies. Whether or not that's the case, it's hard to tell, but I don't believe that Callus holds much more favor than those that have served the Witness for longer. If Shivor Wrath still serves the Witness because of a lie, I can't imagine that it's too much of a stretch for the Witness to simply tell Callus what he wanted to hear. The 11th and penultimate repressed memory tells us more about what Callus believes now, and about his faith in the Witness's plan. More importantly, I think he tells us some crucial details about the future.
There, in that gravity shadow, I was truly seen. There, I understood my role in the closing of the circle. The Witness opened its mind to me, and I saw my darkest desire made reality. I will be the last. It is my right. I am the herald. I am the end.
So what does Callus tell us about the Witness's plans here? Well, I think we can now adequately understand something more. I believe that we now see the nature of the Witness unlocked before us just a little bit, particularly when you look back at the Vow of the Disciple raid and think back to the Prophecy Wall. You can realize that what Callus is describing here may contain similarities to what the Wall describes. The Prophecy Wall in particular has a third line stating that the Witness will enter Earth and commune with the Traveler and drink the light. Callus states here that the Witness intends to free everyone from the great loom of light and dark, and the greater design that the universe has built because of these two forces, because it sees the space between these forces. It could just be a way of stating that the Witness will destroy the light, but I feel like more than that, it's some kind of way of describing a sort of metamorphosis, a combining of these two forces in destruction, or perhaps even a third way that disregards light and dark entirely. Particularly when Callus states that the Witness sees things differently, and that it sees the gaps between those threads, it almost implies that the Witness wishes to see both light and darkness fall, and for whatever exists in the gap to take over. That's a bit of hearty speculation, and it's quite a reach, so don't take that as fact. But also keep in mind that this is Callus's perspective of the witness's plans. They may not have fully informed him of everything that's going on. A lot of what Callus is stating is riddled with metaphor, so it's not hard to see where he could be lending some poetic language to what is being shown. But I think this one repressed memory is worth keeping in mind for the future. There are two similar threads in game now from very interesting sources, both of which are disciples, that lend us this thread of what the witness might do in Lightfall. Let's keep that in mind if ever we see a third disciple come into the picture. In the final moments before reaching Callus's darkest secret, we hear one more revelation, and a clue about what we're about to face. Take a listen to that clue first, and then we'll get to the final repressed memory.
She is more beautiful than any star I have ever beheld. I name her Kaito, for the brightest star in our sky. May she outshine it always.
Before we head down into the final arena, there is that final repressed memory for us to collect. In this place, just before we face Callus's greatest shame, lies the truth we have been searching for. Upon claiming this repressed memory, we will also see the final dialogue from Eris Morn change. Here we see the truth of Callus's intentions.
I have reached the limits of what this crumbling body can offer, and yet there is so much more that I must do. I must shed my remaining attachments to this flesh and ascend. The others have, and a path is laid before me. There is fear in this. Fear of losing myself. But there is no other way. I must prove my loyalty, or wither. To understand the final shape, I must become more than myself.
We're going to be revisiting that 12th repressed memory a lot this season, particularly when we discuss Callus. Lock it in your memory. It is a subtle line, but Callus becoming more than himself is a big hint to what we'll see next. Finally, we face Callus's greatest regret, his greatest shame, the final foe within this dungeon, a nightmare that he cannot escape, the nightmare of his own daughter, the Princess Imperial, Keitel. Within this place, we not only fight the nightmare of Keitel within two realms, but we also fight the nightmare in the shadow of one of the greatest monuments to Callus's life, his giant Bell of Conquests. As a former Emperor of the Cabal, it only makes sense that his bell would be as massive as this, and in order to properly defeat Keitel, we must challenge her nightmare to combat in the Cabal ways of old, by ringing the Bell of Conquest, and facing her power as best we can. The battle is a fierce one, and there is little doubt that the strength of this nightmare is enhanced further thanks to the depths of Callus's shame that he feels for Keitel. The daughter who betrayed him, and all he had worked for, the daughter who held on to remnants of an Imperium that he had tried to dismantle, the daughter who now stands defiantly against the will of the Witness. Such defiance in the face of the end was perhaps more than Callus could comprehend, and thus Keitel's power is overwhelming. But a Guardian is an equally powerful force, and so after repeated inversions between the nightmare and dream within Callus's mind, we struck down the nightmare at the heart of his greatest shame, and then Eris Morn pulled us back out into real space. If you completed the dungeon normally, then your final words from Eris are uncertain, but I believe if you discover that 12th memory fragment, the truth of the matter is revealed once again. Callus is attempting to ascend, to claim the final shape. Whether he succeeds or not, it should be clear now that he is a disciple of the Witness, and that his faith in his new god is unyielding. But this is not all that we can learn from the dungeon. There are a few strange lore entries for us to talk about, as well as a certain exotic sword that one can find. I'll be covering them as time goes on. But for now, that is all we've got to cover today. Remember, most importantly of all, I don't care if you like the video or comment, I would love it though if you went ahead and made a date mark in your calendar for that GCX charity livestream. I'm going to see about getting a video live just before all of this goes onwards and before we actually go live with that particular stream. So please do go ahead and show up if you are so inclined, and give generously to the kids if you can afford to do so. Of course, also know that as per usual, your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.